One daughter is a doctor, the other is a maid, my father declared, lifting his glass before 14 guests at our family Thanksgiving dinner. Then he laughed, and they all laughed with him. My 8-year-old daughter sat right beside me. She tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, is being a maid bad?" That became the final Thanksgiving I remained silent, because what I said next, in front of everyone at that table, changed everything, including my father. He has not hosted a holiday dinner since. But before I reveal what I said that night, you need to understand the 6 years leading up to it, and why the man my father spent the entire evening desperately trying to impress was the one person in the room who already knew precisely who I was. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. My name is Thea O'Neill. I'm 31 years old. I'm a single mother, and for the past 6 years, my family has referred to me as the Maid. Let me take you back to the spring 6 years ago, the week I returned home with nothing but 2 suitcases and a 2-year-old on my hip. The drive from Richmond to Millbrook takes roughly 2 hours without stops. I pulled over 3 times because Lily kept crying. At 2 years old, she couldn't grasp why Daddy wasn't in the car. Truthfully, neither could I. My ex-husband vanished on a Tuesday, emptied the checking account on Wednesday, and filed for divorce from his mother's address on Thursday. By Friday, I stood on my parents' porch in Millbrook, Virginia, clutching a diaper bag and whatever shreds of dignity remained. My father opened the door. He glanced at the suitcases, then at me, then at Lily. "The cottage out back is empty," he said. "This is temporary. Don't make it a habit. No hug, no 'are you okay?' just conditions." The cottage was 300 square feet, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom whose shower turned cold after 4 minutes. But it rested on my parents' land. No lease, no paperwork, only my father's word. At the time, I didn't think that would matter. Within a week, I was knocking on doors, cleaning houses for $15 an hour cash, while a neighbor watched Lily. I scrubbed bathtubs, mopped hardwood floors, organized pantries for women living the life I once imagined for myself. That same month, my older sister Meredith completed her dermatology residency. My parents hosted a dinner for 20. I arrived late, still wiping bleach from my hands after a job across town. Richard, my father, seized the moment. Standing at the head of the table, he announced loudly enough for all to hear, "Sorry, Thea's late. She was scrubbing someone's bathtub." Everyone chuckled. Meredith looked away. I sat down and said nothing. That was the first time. It would not be the last. The truth is, the jokes hadn't begun when I moved home. They'd started long before I ever left. Growing up, Meredith received SAT tutoring, AP summer programs, college tours at Duke and UVA. When she gained admission to medical school, my father took out a second mortgage to cover her tuition, every penny without a second thought. When my turn came, he sat me at the kitchen table and said, "Community college is plenty for someone like you." Someone like me. That phrase still echoes when I close my eyes. I attended Blue Ridge Community College. I paid my own way, waitressing, babysitting, cleaning the church on Sundays. I graduated in 2 years with honors. No one attended the ceremony. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter brunch, my father introduced us the same way. "This is my daughter, Dr. Meredith O'Neill Hartley." Then, almost as an afterthought, he'd add, "And this is Thea." Not Thea, who graduated with honors, not Thea raising a child alone, just Thea. My mother never corrected him. When I mentioned it, Patricia would sigh and press her fingers to her temples. "Your father just wants the best for both of you. Don't be so sensitive." What no one at those holiday tables realized, Meredith's medical school cost $400,000. My father covered roughly half. The rest, federal loans totaling $180,000. She still carried, quietly, invisibly, while the world hailed her as the successful one. But at the O'Neill table, appearances ruled, and my place in that picture had long been assigned. At least, that's what they believed. Things shifted the way they often do when desperation takes hold, not through grand strategy, but through quiet patterns. By my second year back in Millbrook, I'd cleaned more than 60 homes, and I began to notice something. The Shenandoah Valley brimmed with vacation estates, grand properties owned by people from D.C. or Richmond who visited perhaps 4 times a year. Those houses required more than cleaning. They needed full management, coordinating groundskeepers, scheduling maintenance, handling guest turnovers, guiding plumbers through the door at 7 a.m., and securing the property after caterers left at midnight. Few handled it effectively. I filed for an LLC, built a simple website at 2 a.m. while Lily slept, and named it Magnolia Estate Services. It sounded grander than it was, just me and a second-hand laptop at first. That same month, I secured my first 3 contracts, modest but genuine. I told my mother, excitement bubbling, "Mom, I just signed 3 clients. I'm building something." Patricia nodded. "That's nice, honey. Meredith just got invited to speak at a dermatology conference in Boston." I stood in the kitchen, phone still open to the contract confirmation, and finally understood, deeply, irrevocably, that nothing I created would ever truly register in this house. I could cure cancer, and my mother would ask whether Meredith had cured it first. That night, after Lily drifted off, my phone rang, an unknown number with a 540 area code. "Hi, I'm Gloria, your father's sister, and I think we need to talk." I nearly dropped the phone. In our family, Gloria Ashford was a name spoken of in whispers, if at all. My father treated her as past tense. Gloria had divorced her husband a decade earlier. In a place like Millbrook, where the Rotary Club still began meetings with prayer and separated couples relocated to different counties, that alone branded her a scandal. Yet she stayed. She opened an antique shop on Birch Street, lived alone, and seemed content. Richard severed all ties, declaring her a disgrace to the family name. I hadn't spoken to her in 10 years. "I heard about you from a mutual client," Gloria said over coffee the next week. Her shop smelled of cedar and aged books. Small towns, everyone knows someone who knows someone. She wasted no time. "I want to invest in your company. $15,000, not a loan, equity, because someone should have believed in you long ago." I stared at her. That sum exceeded what I'd earned in the prior 3 months combined. "I'm not doing this to spite her brother," she added, as if reading my thoughts. "Then why?" "Because I know exactly what it feels like to be erased from a family simply for choosing your own path." She set her cup down. "Sound familiar?" I accepted the money, hired 2 part-time employees, and began running operations like a legitimate company instead of a frantic one-woman hustle. Before I left, Gloria said something that lodged deep inside me. "Family should be a safe place, Thea, not a cage." Then she paused. "There's something I know about your father that you don't, but not yet." I drove home carrying more questions than answers, along with a check that would alter everything. 2 years. That's how long the silence held. By age 27, I had 5 employees, 8 properties under contract, and a solid reputation across the valley. Magnolia remained small, but it was undeniably real. I reinvested every dollar, purchased a proper work van, printed business cards featuring a logo Lily helped me choose, a white magnolia against deep green. I was still living in the cottage, still on my father's land, still without a lease. That's when Richard chose to remind me. It was a Sunday dinner, the only kind my parents hosted without an audience. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, Meredith and Donald seated across from me, Lily coloring quietly in the corner. Midway through the meal, Richard set his fork down. "That land out back is worth something now," he said, casual as if remarking on the weather. "I might need to rearrange things." I looked up. "Rearrange things? How?" "Don't worry about it. Just know that nothing is permanent." The room fell silent. Meredith stared at her plate. Donald took a long sip of water. Patricia fussed with the salt shaker. No one spoke, because in this family, when Richard made a statement, it wasn't an invitation to discuss, it was a ruling. Later that night, after tucking Lily in, Patricia called. Her voice trembled, caught between apology and instruction. "Someone came to look at the property last week," she said. "A developer?" My stomach sank. "What developer?" "I don't know the details. Your father handles these things." A pause. "It's probably nothing. I shouldn't have mentioned it." She hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed in the cottage, on land I didn't own, in a home with no lease, and felt the earth tilt beneath me. I began searching for a rental, something close to Lily's school, something I could manage. The trouble with Millbrook is its small size and tight housing market. 3-bedroom rentals near Jefferson Elementary were nearly non-existent, and the few available cost double what I could afford without draining the business. Patricia learned within a week. In a town this size, the realtor I contacted was her friend's daughter. The phone rang at 8 a.m. "You're looking at apartments?" Patricia's voice quivered. "You're going to take Lily away from us." "Mom, I'm not taking anyone away. Your father will be devastated after everything we've done for you." I wanted to ask what exactly that everything was, but I held my tongue. That evening, Richard called. No greeting. "You move out, you're on your own completely." His tone was flat, matter of fact. "Don't expect us to babysit Lily on weekends. Don't expect Thanksgiving invitations." "Are you serious?" "I'm being practical." He knew precisely where to strike. Lily called my parents every night before bed. She drew pictures of Grandpa's garden. She counted the days until visits. Severing that bond wasn't something I could inflict on my daughter, and he knew it. So I stopped looking. I wasn't staying out of weakness. I was staying because leaving at the wrong moment would have jeopardized everything I'd built. In a small town, Richard O'Neill carried weight. If I left, he'd spin it as abandonment, the ungrateful daughter who stole their granddaughter away. That story would reach every potential client within 20 miles. I needed to grow strong enough that when I finally walked away, I wouldn't need anything from him. Not his land, not his childcare, not his version of events. That day hadn't arrived yet, but it was approaching. The cracks appeared first in Lily. Her teacher called me in on a Wednesday, Mrs. Patterson. Gentle, 20 years in 2nd grade. "She's been quiet at lunch," she said. "The other children asked what her mom does for work. She didn't answer. She just shrugged and looked away." I sat in that small plastic chair and felt something inside me fracture. My daughter, 8 years old, was already learning shame over me. That night, as I tucked her in, Lily asked, "Mommy, do you like your job?" "I love my job, baby." "Then why does your grandpa always say it funny?" I kissed her forehead, switched off the light, then went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at the wall for an hour. This was no longer about me. Richard's jokes, his little performances at every holiday, they were sinking into my daughter's bones. She was 8, and she was already absorbing that her mother wasn't worth pride. That same week, an opportunity arrived in my inbox. A new luxury development in the valley, 12 vacation homes, full-service management contract. The owner sought one firm to handle it all. Annual value, $340,000, enough to double my revenue, hire a full team, and finally leave the cottage behind. I called Gloria, told her about the opportunity and about Lily. She listened quietly for a moment. Then, "Fear is a landlord too, Thea, and the rent keeps rising." That night, I picked up the phone and dialed the developer. 2 rings. A calm, professional voice answered. "Frank Calloway, Calloway Development. What can I do for you?" I drew a breath and pitched. Frank didn't commit on the first call. He said, "Send me your portfolio." So I did. Every property photo, every client reference, every maintenance log I'd ever compiled. I formatted it like a woman with something to prove, because I did. 3 days later, Frank called back. He said, "I asked around. 3 different property owners in the valley told me the same thing. If you want it done right, you call Magnolia." We met at his office in Staunton the following Monday. I wore my one blazer, the one that still carried a faint trace of dry cleaning chemicals because I'd only had it cleaned once. Frank shook my hand, met my eyes, and said, "You're the real deal, Fia. Let's do this." I signed a 2-year management contract for 3 properties, the initial phase of his development. Just like that, Magnolia evolved from a one-van operation into a company with genuine structure. I hired 4 new people that month. That same week at home, the other shoe fell. Richard summoned me to his study. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and aged leather, the place where he issued declarations, not requests. "I need you to sign some papers," he said. "What papers?" "An agreement that you'll vacate the cottage by March." "March? That's 4 months away." "Plenty of time." I looked at the document on his desk, professional letterhead, legal phrasing, a bolded move-out date. "Why?" I asked. He leaned back. "Because it's my property, that's why." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I stared at the page and noticed the name of the law firm. Not a family attorney, but a commercial real estate practice. Someone was purchasing this land. "I'm not signing anything tonight," I said. "I'll read it first." I walked out. My hands remained steady, my heart did not. Patricia's approach was always gentler. That was what made it sting even more. She invited me for tea the next morning. The kitchen carried the gentle scent of chamomile. She'd set out the good cups, the ones with delicate gold rims, a quiet peace offering wrapped in fine porcelain. "Your father is under a great deal of stress," she began, eyes glistening, hands neatly folded. The role of the concerned mother practiced to near perfection. "His investments haven't performed well. He needs to sell that land." "Then why didn't he simply talk to me?" "We are talking, Thea. You're just not listening." I set my cup down carefully. "You're asking me to uproot my daughter from the only stable home she's known in 4 months without explaining why until I discovered it myself?" Patricia's expression tightened. The practiced softness gave way. "Meredith would never make things this difficult." "Meredith doesn't live in a cottage on Dad's land." "Exactly, because Meredith made something of herself." The words struck like an open hand, not because they were vicious, I'd heard harsher, but because they came from my mother, the woman who once braided my hair each morning before school, the woman who was meant to be my safest place. I stood. I left the tea untouched on the table. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, which somehow felt louder. That night, sitting on the cottage porch while Lily slept inside, my phone buzzed. A text from a number absent for months. "Meredith, can we talk privately?" I stared at the screen for a long while. My sister hadn't reached out in over a year, not for my birthday, not for Lily's, not for anything. Now suddenly she wanted to speak. Something was wrong. I just didn't know which piece yet. We met at a small coffee shop in Westboro, 20 minutes from Millbrook, far enough that no one would carry the news back home. Meredith looked different. Not diminished exactly, just quieter. Hair pulled back plainly, no earrings. The assured posture I'd once envied had eased into something closer to weariness. She ordered black coffee. I did the same. We sat by the window, and for a full minute neither of us spoke. Then she said it. "Donald wants a divorce." I blinked. "Since when?" "Since July. We've been pretending for 4 months." "Why tell me now?" She studied her cup. "Because you're the only person in this family who knows what it feels like to start over." I hadn't expected those words to land so heavily. Meredith, the golden daughter, the one whose name anchored every toast, was sitting across from me in a coffee shop, asking how to survive men who had let her down. Another silence. Then, softer. "I know they treat you differently." I never said anything. I should have. I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. "How much debt are you carrying?" I asked instead. She winced. $180,000 in federal loans. Donald handled the payments. If we split... She trailed off. I could finish the sentence myself. She asked if I knew a good divorce lawyer. I gave her the name of the one I'd used 5 years earlier. She jotted it on a napkin, folded it into her purse, and for a fleeting moment looked exactly like the frightened 19-year-old I remembered before medical school turned her into a title. I didn't feel pity for her. I didn't feel triumph either. I just felt exhausted. Driving home, I kept thinking how strange it was, both O'Neill daughters sitting in coffee shops trying to figure out how to survive men who had let them down. And at that point, I kept asking myself, if Meredith was falling apart too, why did my parents cling so fiercely to this flawless image? Why had they spent decades constructing a showcase family when no one inside it was truly all right? Do you think that's love or just fear of what the neighbors might whisper? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. 3 months before Thanksgiving, the call came. Magnolia had grown to 12 employees and 15 luxury properties across the Shenandoah Valley. Revenue had crossed the $2 million mark earlier that year. I was running a genuine operation now, scheduling software, uniformed crews, quarterly client reviews. The girl who once scrubbed bathtubs for $15 an hour now signed contracts over lunch. No one in my family knew the true scale. To them, I remained Thea, the one who cleans houses. Then a journalist called. "Hi, Miss O'Neill. I'm with the Shenandoah Business Journal. We're featuring local entrepreneurs under 35. Your name came up 3 separate times from different referrals." 3 different people had recommended me? Not Meredith, not my father's Rotary contacts, me. I agreed to the interview on one condition. Please don't mention my family or personal background. This is about the business. The reporter, a young woman named Kelsey, spent 2 hours with me at one of the estates I managed. She photographed the team working. She asked about revenue, growth strategy, client retention. She treated me like a CEO because that's what I had become. "This issue publishes the week of Thanksgiving," Kelsey said as she packed up. "You'll receive an advance copy." Thanksgiving. The timing felt almost deliberate. I told no one in my family, not my parents, not Meredith, only Gloria, who listened over the phone and then let out a warm, surprised laugh. Well, that's going to make for an interesting holiday. For the first time in 6 years, someone was asking about my work, not as a punchline, but as a success story. I carried that feeling quietly, like a lit match held steady in a dark room, waiting. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was in the main house kitchen helping Patricia sort her guest list when Richard strode in, chest expanded, hone held aloft like a prize. "Guess who's coming to Thanksgiving?" he announced. Patricia looked up. "Who?" "Frank Calloway." He spoke the name as though introducing royalty. Frank Calloway, owner of Calloway Development Group, the largest residential developer in the Shenandoah Valley. Richard had been pursuing Frank for months, trying to close the sale of his land. "This is my shot. Calloway at our table. Good food, good wine, good impressions. By New Year's, the deal is sealed." I stood at the counter, still holding a serving spoon, and felt my blood run cold. Frank Calloway, the man I had a standing video call with every Tuesday at 9 a.m., the man whose properties I'd managed for 2 years, the man who called me the most reliable operator in the region. My father had never once asked the name of my company. He'd never visited my office. He'd never searched for me online. And Frank had no reason to connect the woman running Magnolia Estate Services with the daughter who returned each night to a 300-square-foot cottage behind her father's house. 2 separate worlds on the verge of colliding at the same dinner table. I excused myself, drove back to the cottage, and called Gloria. "Frank Calloway is coming to Thanksgiving," I said. "Dad invited him." A long silence. Then Gloria exhaled slowly. "Well, this is going to be very interesting." "What do I do?" "Nothing. You don't have to do anything, Thea. The truth has a way of revealing itself." Then, almost offhand, "I have my own plans for Thanksgiving this year." I didn't ask what she meant. I probably should have. The Monday before Thanksgiving, my father summoned me to his study once more. This time, the document was different. Thicker, notarized on one side, a move-out agreement with a printed deadline, March 1st. "Sign this by Thanksgiving," Richard said. He didn't sit. He stood behind his desk like a man accustomed to looming over others. "After that, I'm involving a lawyer." I picked up the papers and read slowly. Move-out terms, waiver of any claims to the property, and buried on the second page, the sale price, $410,000. Richard was selling the land. the land I lived on, the land Lily knew as home. I turned to the final page and saw the buyer's name, Callaway Development Group. My stomach plummeted so sharply I thought I might be ill. My father was selling the property to my largest client, the same man he had invited to Thanksgiving dinner, the same man who had no idea the empty cottage Richard had promised was occupied every night by me and my daughter. I looked at Richard. He looked back, steady, unruffled, like a man who had already won. "You told Frank the cottage was empty." "Not a question," he replied. "It will be, because you're leaving. Because you're making a business decision." I set the papers down on his desk. I didn't sign. I didn't argue. I simply walked to the door. "Thea," his voice hardened, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." I turned the knob. "I'm not the one making it hard, Dad." I walked to the cottage, closed the door, sank to the floor, and called my accountant, then my lawyer, then Gloria. Thanksgiving was 5 days away, and for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't dreading it. I was ready. Thanksgiving morning carried the scent of cinnamon, rosemary, and something I couldn't quite name, perhaps dread. I woke early, dressed Lily in her green corduroy dress, the one with the tiny embroidered leaves. She twirled before the mirror and asked, "Do I look pretty, Mommy?" "You look perfect." "Will Grandpa be nice today?" I knelt, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know, baby, but I'll be right beside you the whole time." By 9 a.m., I was in my parents' kitchen, apron tied, hair up, hands deep in a turkey. Same as every year. Patricia assigned the cooking to me because Meredith has to get ready, as if roasting a 20-pound bird and preparing 4 sides from scratch wasn't work worth dressing for. Meredith arrived at noon, fresh blowout, pearl earrings, cream cashmere. Donald followed silently behind, carrying a bottle of wine like a man bearing his own gravestone. Guests arrived in waves. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, the Warrens from 2 doors down, Pastor David and his wife Ruth, Richard's cousin Ray and his wife, 2 couples from the Rotary Club. Then, at 12:30, a black SUV eased into the driveway. Frank Callaway and his wife, Donna. Richard nearly sprinted to the door. Handshake, shoulder pat. "Frank, welcome, welcome. We're so glad you could make it." Frank entered, polite and composed. He scanned the room. Then he saw me in the kitchen doorway, apron on, hair pulled back, faint sweat at my temples from 3 hours of cooking. Patricia swooped in. "Oh, that's Thea, our younger daughter. She helps around the house." Frank nodded courteously. A flicker, perhaps recognition, crossed his face, but it passed. He moved to the living room, and Richard guided him out back to tour the land. My land. Dinner began at 2 o'clock. 14 people around a table set with Patricia's finest china, the white plates with blue borders reserved for holidays. Candles flickering, napkins folded precisely, everything arranged to project the family that had it all together. Richard stood at the head, tapped his glass with a fork, his voice carrying that practiced Sunday sermon warmth he reserved for company. "I want to give thanks," he said, his voice carrying that practiced Sunday sermon warmth he reserved for company. "For this family, for this home, and especially for my Meredith, Dr. Meredith O'Neill Hartley, who makes us all so proud." Applause followed, warm, automatic, like church cropping. Meredith smiled, tight and rehearsed. Beside her, Donald stared at his plate, jaw clenched. No one noticed. Richard wasn't finished. "And, of course, Thea," he paused, letting the moment settle, then grinned. "One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid." He laughed, that low, self-satisfied chuckle I'd heard 100 times. A few joined in, Cousin Ray, Uncle Jim, the nervous, reflexive laughter that rushes in when silence feels uncomfortable. Most of the table fell quiet. Pastor David studied his napkin. Ruth pressed her lips together. Donna Callaway shifted in her seat. Frank, seated 3 chairs to my right, didn't laugh. He looked at my father, then at me. Under the table, Lily's hand found mine. Her small fingers were cold. I squeezed them gently. I didn't speak. I didn't react. not yet. But I felt Frank's gaze linger on me a moment longer than necessary, like a man trying to place a familiar face, like a puzzle piece hovering just above its proper slot. He hadn't connected it, not yet, but the evening was still young. After the main course, after the turkey was carved, sides passed, and plates refilled, Patricia arose. She held her glass like someone about to accept an honor. "I just want to add my own little toast," she said, voice honeyed, "to Meredith, the light of our family. We are so, so blessed." She didn't say my name. She didn't look at me. She didn't mention Lily. The table murmured approval. More clinking, more smiles directed at Meredith, who now looked as though she wanted to melt into the wallpaper. Then, in the hush after the glasses were lowered, a small voice broke through. "Mommy." Lily, right beside me, eyes wide and glistening with confusion. "Mommy, why does Grandpa say you're just a maid?" The table froze. Every fork stilled. Every breath held. 8-year-old asking in front of 14 adults whether her mother's work made her lesser. Patricia recovered first. "Lily, honey, Grandpa was just being funny." Lily looked at her grandmother, but no one laughed. Silence settled. Heavy, weighted silence. I looked at my daughter, this small, brave, truthful person who had voiced what no adult at the table had dared to say. I looked at Frank Calloway, watching with an expression I couldn't fully read. I looked at my father, still standing at the head, glass in hand, smile fading. And something inside me, something bent, stretched, and trampled for 6 years, for 20 years, for my entire life, finally, quietly, broke. Not shattered, broke free. I set my napkin on the table, pushed my chair back, and stood. The chair scraped across the hardwood. Every head turned. I looked at my daughter first. Then I spoke. "Lily, being a maid is not bad. Any honest work is good work." My voice stayed level, calm, the tone I used with clients, not the one I once used with my father. "But since Grandpa brought it up, let me tell you what Mommy actually does." Richard's smile vanished. "Thea, sit down. This isn't the time." "You made it the time, Dad." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I stood up in front of 14 people and defined me. Now I get to define myself. The room felt airless. Patricia's hand rose to her throat. Meredith's eyes widened. "I started by cleaning houses," I said, looking at Lily but speaking to everyone at the table. "That's true. I'm not ashamed of it. But I didn't stop there. I let one beat of silence pass. I built a company. It's called Magnolia Estate Services. I manage 15 luxury properties across the Shenandoah Valley. I have 12 full-time employees, and last year my revenue reached $2.3 million. Nothing. No sound, no movement, just 14 people quietly recalibrating everything they thought they understood about me. Richard's face, I'll never forget it. The color drained from his cheeks as if someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Patricia, Thea, why are you making a scene?" "I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm finishing Dad's toast." Then, from the far end of the table, I heard a glass set down slowly, deliberately. Frank Calloway was staring at me, not with surprise, but with recognition, the kind that arrives when the final tumbler in a lock clicks into place. "Wait," he said. Frank stood, not quickly, not dramatically, the way a man rises when something essential must be said, and he isn't the sort to raise his voice. "Thea O'Neill," he said, "you're the owner of Magnolia Estate Services." Every eye in the room darted between us. "Yes, Mr. Calloway." Frank turned to my father, his expression shifting, polite confusion hardening into something firmer. "Richard, you didn't tell me your daughter runs Magnolia." My father's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. "She's been managing my entire Shenandoah portfolio for 2 years, 3 properties, full service contracts." Frank's voice remained even, factual, the tone of someone choosing words with care because the wrong ones could inflict real harm. "Richard, I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Frank repeated it flatly, not a question, a judgment. Richard, last Tuesday you told me your younger one was between jobs. The room drew a collective breath. Between jobs, Uncle Jim murmured under his breath. Aunt Carol covered her mouth. Pastor David closed his eyes. Patricia tried to salvage it. We always knew Thea was hard-working. Frank didn't glance at her. His gaze stayed fixed on Richard, who was now staring at the tablecloth as though he might vanish into it. You invited me into your home, Frank said quietly. You introduced your daughter as the maid, and the whole time she's the person I trust with a portfolio worth more than this entire street. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something stranger, like watching a wall crumble and realizing I'd spent my entire life standing behind it. Lily tugged my hand. I looked down. "Mommy," she whispered, "is that the man from your Tuesday calls?" I almost laughed. "Yes, baby, that's him." The doorbell rang. The timing was so precise it felt almost rehearsed, but it wasn't. Gloria had always possessed an instinct for dramatic entrances, perhaps the one trait she and Richard still shared. Patricia opened the door. Her face went pale. Gloria Ashford stood on the porch in a navy coat, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a magazine in the other. Her silver hair was pinned neatly back, and she smiled the way a woman smiles when she's waited 10 years for this precise moment. "What are you doing here?" Richard's voice cracked. "You weren't invited." "I know." Gloria stepped inside. Her eyes swept the room, the frozen guests, the scattered silverware, the 14 faces that seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. "But I brought something for my niece." She walked past Patricia, past Richard, straight to the table. She placed the Shenandoah Business Journal flat on the white tablecloth, right between the cranberry sauce and the gravy boat. Then she opened it to the feature spread. A full page. A photograph of me standing before a stone estate, arms crossed, Magnolia logo visible on the van behind me. The headline read, "Magnolia Estate Services, How a Single Mom Built a $2.3 million business from scratch." The magazine passed hand to hand. Aunt Carol, Pastor David, Ruth, Donna Calloway, who read it twice. Ray's wife held it to the light as though appraising a diamond. Richard stood at the head of the table and watched his carefully orchestrated evening unravel. Gloria looked at her brother, not with cruelty, but with something closer to sorrow. "You've been so busy being ashamed of your daughter that you missed what she actually became." Richard said nothing. For the first time in 63 years, Richard O'Neill had absolutely nothing to say. Frank picked up the magazine, scanned the opening paragraph, set it down. Then he turned to Richard with the expression of a man whose contract has just been rewritten without his consent. "Richard," he said, voice measured, professional, "the land you're selling me, that's the land your daughter lives on." Richard's jaw tightened. "That's a separate matter. Is your daughter being displaced because of our deal?" Silence again, but this silence had teeth. I spoke, not loudly, not with satisfaction, just clearly. "I saw the contract on his desk last week. He asked me to sign a move-out agreement by Thanksgiving. The sale price is $410,000, and he told you the cottage was empty." Frank leaned back in his chair. He rubbed his forehead with one hand. "Richard, I don't do business this way." "Frank, this is a family matter." "It became my business the moment you lied to me." Frank shook his head. "You told me that cottage was vacant. I based my offer on that." The table had fractured into a dozen private reactions. Aunt Carol whispered to Jim. Pastor David's wife gripped her husband's arm. The Warrens looked as though they were witnessing a slow-motion car accident. And then from the quiet end of the table, Donald Hartley spoke. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was hoarse, as though unused for weeks. "But this isn't right. None of this is right." Meredith looked at her husband. For a moment, something passed between them. Not love, not forgiveness, but perhaps the faint echo of why they had once chosen each other. She reached under the table and took his hand. The room lay in ruins, not from shouting, not from violence, just from truth standing in the center of a Thanksgiving table, refusing to sit back down. Frank stood. He buttoned his jacket, a small, deliberate gesture that carried more weight than any speech. "Richard," he said, "I'm going to need to pause our discussions about the land." His voice remained courteous, professional, final. "I need to think about this." Everyone at the table understood. Pause meant end. The way "we should talk" means it's already over. Richard tried. "Frank, let's discuss this privately." "We've been talking privately. That seems to be the problem." Frank straightened his cuffs. He turned to me. A slight nod, not warm, not cold, professional, one business owner to another. "Thea, I'll call you Monday. We have work to do." "Yes, sir. Thank you." Frank placed a hand on Donna. She rose, gathered her purse, and they walked out the front door without looking back. Within 5 minutes, Pastor David and Ruth excused themselves. "Early morning tomorrow," David said, but his eyes lingered on Richard with an inescapable disappointment. The Warrens followed, then Ray and his wife. The excuse carousel spun, headache, long drive, early flight, until the table that had seated 14 was reduced to 6. Richard sat in his chair, the patriarch at the head of an empty table. His glass remained full, his plate lay untouched. The man who had opened the evening with a toast and a laugh now occupied a silence so dense you could hear the candles burning lower. $410,000 vanished. His reputation in a community that prized reputation above nearly everything lay in ruins. Not because I attacked him, not because I humiliated him, simply because I told the truth. And truth, when you've lied long enough, has a way of introducing itself. The house was quiet now. Dishes abandoned, candles guttering, 6 people in a room that felt emptier than empty. I lifted Lily from her chair. She wrapped her arms around my neck and rested her head on my shoulder the way she had at 2 years old, back when I carried her into this house with nothing but 2 suitcases and hope. I walked to where Richard and Patricia sat, not too close, just close enough. "I'll be out of the cottage by the end of the month." Richard looked up. "Not because you asked," I said, "because I should have left long ago." "Thea," his voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "I'm not angry, Dad. I'm done waiting for you to see me." Patricia's face crumbled. Tears came, real ones this time, not the kind she had always used as currency. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to repair them. I looked at Meredith. She sat with hands flat on the table, mascara faintly smudged, Donald's arm still touching hers. She met my eyes and gave a small nod, no words required. I turned and walked to the front door. Gloria stood on the porch. She hadn't come inside for the conclusion. She had waited out here, hands in her coat pockets, watching the November sky darken. "My living room is big enough," she said simply. "Plenty of space for 2. Lily lifted her head and looked at Gloria. "Are you the lady who sends me birthday cards?" Gloria smiled. "Every single year, sweetheart." I strapped Lily into her car seat, closed the door, and settled behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, the house shrank. The porch light flickered. No one came out to wave. I took a breath, full, deep, filling every corner of my lungs. For the first time in 6 years, in a town like Millbrook, you don't need the internet. You have church. By Sunday, 3 days after Thanksgiving, the story had spread through every pew, every coffee hour, every parking lot conversation after service. 14 guests meant 14 households, and each told 5 more. By week's end, everyone who had ever shaken Richard O'Neill's hand at a Rotary meeting knew exactly what had unfolded at his dinner table. The fallout was precise and measurable. Pastor David called Richard directly. "I think it's best if you step back from the fundraiser committee this year, Richard. Focus on your family." Translation, don't show your face. Patricia's women's auxiliary group, the one that organized the Christmas charity drive every December, politely informed her they were going in a different direction with leadership this year. The woman who delivered the message told a friend, who told her hairdresser, who told me, We need people who uplift other women, Patricia. The Shenandoah Business Journal hit newsstands that Wednesday. Kelsey's article appeared with my photo on the secondary cover. Within days, 3 property owners I had never contacted reached out to Magnolia. I read the article, each one said, like a password. Mrs. Patterson, Lily's teacher, stopped me at pickup. I saw it, she said, holding up the magazine. I always knew there was more to you than this town gave you credit for. In the grocery store, at the gas station, at the post office, people looked at me differently. Not with pity, not with the polite condescension I had grown used to, but with something new, respect. And Richard, who had built his entire identity on being the most respected man on his street, stopped attending church, stopped going to Rotary, stopped answering his phone. The silence from the big house was deafening. Meredith called 2 days after Thanksgiving, not to apologize for our parents, not to smooth things over. Donald and I are separating, she said. I told Mom and Dad last night. How did they take it? A long pause. Mom said, this can't be happening. First Thea, now you. Her voice cracked on the word first, as though hearing it for what it truly was. Not concern, but inventory. Patricia wasn't mourning her daughter's pain. She was tallying her losses. And Dad? Nothing. He just sat there. I think he's run out of speeches. I pictured it. Richard at his desk, the patriarch who had suddenly lost both audience and stage in the same week, a man who had spent decades performing fatherhood for others and never learned how to do it in private. Meredith began calling more after that. Not long conversations, short ones, awkward, honest. How did you do this at 24? She asked one night. Badly, but I did it. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her since we were children, sharing a bedroom, whispering past midnight. I always thought you were the brave one, she said quietly. I was just the one with the diploma on the wall. I didn't correct her. She was right, not about bravery, but about the diploma. That's all it had ever been. A diploma on a wall in a house where image mattered more than anything, and love came with conditions. We weren't suddenly close. Too much silence lay between us for that. But something had shifted, like 2 trees that had grown apart, finally discovering their roots still touched beneath the soil. It wasn't a movie ending. It was a Tuesday night phone call, and that was enough. The call came 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I was washing dishes in Gloria's kitchen when my phone lit up. Dad. I dried my hands, answered. Thea? His voice was different, not softer exactly, but diminished, as though someone had turned down the volume on a speaker that had been blaring for 63 years. Hi, Dad. You've made your point. Can we move past this? I leaned against the counter. Move past what exactly? The Thanksgiving thing? That wasn't a thing, Dad. That was 14 people watching you humiliate your own daughter while she cooked your dinner in front of her child. Silence. The kind that stretches so long you hear the other person breathing. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to get caught. There's a difference. More silence. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking on his end, the one that had stood in the hallway since I was 4. The land deal fell through, he said quieter. I'm in trouble, Thea, financially. I closed my eyes. Part of me, the part that was still his daughter, wanted to help, the part that remembered him holding the bike seat in the driveway until I could balance alone. But I wasn't going to rescue a man who spent 6 years drowning me. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here, I said, voice steady. Not cold, not warm, just clear. But I won't sit at another table where my daughter learns to be ashamed of her mother. He didn't respond. The line went dead. I stood in Gloria's kitchen for a long time, phone still in hand, staring at nothing. Lily ran down the hallway, chasing Gloria's cat, her laughter echoing through the rooms. That sound was enough. It had to be. By mid-December, the townhouse began to feel like home. A 2-bedroom rental on Maple Street, 8 minutes from Lily's school, 12 from the Magnolia office. Not luxurious, but clean, bright, ours. The first morning, Lily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, clutching a small stack of photographs she'd carefully cut from the family album I'd brought along. The cottage, the garden, the main house porch. She taped one to the refrigerator, an Easter picture from 2 years earlier, Lily on Richard's lap, both of them laughing. I looked at it. My daughter had included everyone, her grandparents, Meredith, even Donald. She hadn't erased a single person. I didn't take it down. Boundaries aren't about pretending people never existed. They're about deciding how close they're allowed to stand. That week, Frank Calloway called. Not about the land, about the business. "I'm expanding the portfolio," he said. 2 new developments in Rockingham County. I want Magnolia to handle both, and I've referred you to 2 colleagues. By January, revenue projections for the coming year reached $3.4 million. I hired 3 more people, moved from a home office to a real one, a converted storefront on Main Street with the Magnolia logo painted across the glass. Gloria came over every Sunday. She'd bring pecan pie, sit on the living room floor with Lily, and build Lego castles that were structurally dubious, but architecturally bold. One Sunday, Lily looked up from her creation and said, "Mommy, I told my friend today that you run a whole company." What did she say? She said, "That's really cool." I turned to the window so Lily wouldn't see the tears, but Gloria noticed and simply nodded, the quiet nod of someone who has waited a long time for something good to finally arrive. Meredith's divorce was finalized in February. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Charlottesville, the first time in her life she had lived entirely alone. No roommate, no husband, no parents' guest room to retreat to. Just her, a futon, and a stack of takeout menus. She called me that first night. "I'm terrified," she said. "How did you do this at 24? I answered, "Badly, really badly. I burned rice for 6 months." She laughed. I laughed. It was the kind of laughter shared only between people who have seen each other at their lowest and chosen to show up anyway. "Mom called," Meredith said after a beat. "She's upset that neither of us came home for Christmas." That's her choice to be upset. We don't owe anyone a performance. A pause. "When did you get this wise?" "It's not wisdom, it's scar tissue." Meredith was quiet for a moment. "You know what I used to be jealous of? Not your company, not the money." "Then what?" "The way you didn't care what they thought. I spent my whole life performing for Dad. The grades, the degree, the marriage, every choice was a line in his speech. And the whole time, you were just living." I cared what they thought. I just ran out of room to show it. We talked for another hour. About nothing, about everything. Lily's school, Meredith's patience, a lemon chicken recipe neither of us could master. It wasn't a Hallmark sister reunion. It was 2 women in their 30s meeting each other for the first time without their parents' scoreboard hanging overhead. It was messy, it was real, and honestly, it was the best conversation I'd had in years. The letter arrived in March. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten envelope in my mailbox, stamp pressed slightly crooked, the way someone does when they haven't mailed a letter in years. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Tight, slanted, all capitals. The same way my father had written on birthday cards when I was small, back when he still sent them. I sat on the porch steps. Lily was at school. The street was quiet. Inside was a single cream-colored card. No store-bought sentiment, just 6 words in blue ink. "Thea, I read the article." "Dad," 6 words. No, "I'm sorry," no, "I was wrong," No explanation, no excuse, no mention of the land deal, Thanksgiving, or the years of jokes that had cut deeper than he would ever grasp. Just, I read the article. I held the card for a long time, turned it over, nothing on the back. Part of me wanted to call him, the daughter part, the part that still remembered the steady weight of his hand on my shoulder as he held the bike seat until I said I was ready, and how he let go exactly when I asked. But I didn't call. I placed the card on the kitchen table beside a vase of magnolias Gloria had brought the day before. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it. I simply left it there, like a door cracked open, not flung wide. Maybe it would take years. Maybe it would never come. A full conversation, a real apology, the kind that begins not with, "Can we move past this?" but with, "I see what I did." But my peace no longer depends on his timing. His 6 words weren't enough, but they were his first, and my peace doesn't depend on his second. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, became successful enough, my parents would simply change, like there was a magic threshold, a revenue number, a magazine cover, a title impressive enough to unlock their approval. But here's what I've learned. You cannot earn love from people unwilling to give it. All you can do is stop letting that absence define you. If you're going through something like this, if you're still sitting at a table where you're the punchline, what have you done about it? Or what do you wish you'd done? Tell me in the comments. I'm telling you this story from the porch of my townhouse on Maple Street. It's a Thursday evening. Lily's inside doing homework at the kitchen table we picked out together at Gloria's antique shop. The magnolia logo on my office window catches the light every morning when I drive past. 12 employees became 16. Frank's referrals turned into long-term contracts. The magazine article led to a local business award. And last month, a woman called from Richmond. She'd found Magnolia online and said, "I heard about you from my cousin. She said you started from nothing." I didn't correct her. Nothing isn't the right word. I started from a 300-square-foot cottage, a 2-year-old daughter, and a family that thought I was a punchline. That's not nothing. That's everything, just pointed in the wrong direction. I don't tell this story for revenge. I'm not interested in making my father look bad. He did that himself in front of 14 witnesses on a holiday meant for gratitude. I tell this story because somewhere right now, someone is watching at 2 a.m., lying in bed, wondering if they're allowed to say enough, wondering if setting a boundary with the people who raised you makes you ungrateful, selfish, or wrong. It doesn't. Setting a boundary is not betrayal. It's the first honest thing you can do in a relationship built on silence. And if no one else has told you, your work matters. Your effort matters. You don't need a title, a toast, or anyone's permission to be proud of who you are. Lily and I are eating ice cream on the porch steps. The sun is setting. She's got chocolate on her chin, and she's laughing at absolutely nothing. This is what freedom sounds like. If this story meant something to you, hit like and share it. Not for me, but for the next person who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this from real people who stood up when staying quiet would have been easier. And if you haven't watched the last video, the link's right there in the description. I think you'll connect with that one too. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.